Okay, so now we're having a recording going on. All right, so let's talk about sales contracts is where we left off last class. And realistically, one of the things that I was talking about is, let's see, I know we went through, I'm looking at the outline for this chapter. Existing and future goods. I think we did talk about existing and future goods. That a contract is under Article 2 of the UCC as long as it is for the sale of goods, and we said that goods, excuse me, are tangible personal property. It can be for existing or future goods. So, if you contract with me for 1,000 widgets that I have yet to manufacture, that is going to be part of the letting people into the room as we go through here. The fact that I'm going to produce these tangible goods in the future is good enough. That will cover them under the UCC. If we have a contract that is for both goods and services, then the contract will be covered by the UCC if the major portion of the contract is for the sale of goods. So if we have a contract that is for a blending of goods and services, then what will happen is the UCC will cover it if it is mostly for goods. I'll sell you a machine that I manufacture that you'll be using in your manufacturing company. The machine, if you buy just the machine, it's $100,000. If you want a service contract to go with that, I'll repair the machine for free for the first 5 years for an additional $50,000. So that's a $150,000 contract. 100,000 of it is machine, 50,000 of it is services. That will be covered by the UCC because it's mostly for the machine. All right. All right. So now the big question is, I told you there's a difference between the UCC and the common law of contracts. And so what we have is, in the common law of contracts, the offer has to be very detailed because the
Hey, Professor G, there's 13 of us in class right now.
I know that. What's up?
We're all on Zoom on this computer.
Hold on a second. Let me turn up my. Go ahead. What's that?
We're all on Zoom on this computer.
Okay.
All right, bet.
Okay. Getting back to what I was saying, the offer under the UCC does not need to be as detailed as it does under the common law of contracts. Under the common law of contracts, we have something called the, we're going to talk about the mirror image rule as we move forward. And the common law of contracts, you make the offer, and the offer is going to be all of the details of the contract itself. And so therefore, when you accept it, the acceptance is purely saying, yes, we have a contract under the terms of the offer. So since we have the offer being detailed, it becomes the contract. Not so under the UCC. The whole thing about the UCC is that it is going under the whole thing about the UCC is it's for the purpose of creating contracts where there may be a problem under common law. So we end up with more contracts being valid under the UCC. And the first reason for that is the terms that are required in an offer. Okay, so an offer has to be super detailed if we're talking about the common law. In the UCC, the offer does not need to have as much detail. As a matter of fact, what I'm trying to do is get to the right page here. The offer does not have to have all of the same details. What it has to have is basically a description of the goods. You have to be able to identify the goods as to what they are. And then you need to be able to give a quantity. How many of them are you buying? So I want to sell you widgets. You want to buy widgets from me. So we'll describe my widgets as the number 5 Class A widget, and you want to buy 10 or 1,000 of them from me. Okay, that's good enough. That's all we need to know. Well, what's the price? When are they supposed to be shipped? Those types of things, not necessary, not necessary. Okay, so what we have is a very broader idea of acceptance of a contract. Okay, another difference between UCC and common law is whether or not the offer can be revoked. Okay, so under common law, if I give an offer and you say, gee, I'd like to have some time to think about that, will you promise to keep the offer open for the next 7 days for me? Under common law, even if I said, yeah, I'll keep the offer open and then promise not to revoke it for the next 7 days, I can still revoke it. Because remember, we needed to have something called an option contract created. So if I gave an offer and you wanted me to leave it open, then to keep it so that I couldn't revoke it, we would have to get into a separate contract. Hey, can you keep that contract open for the next 7 days? I need time to think about it. Well, I'll keep it open, but you have to give me additional consideration. So if you give me, say, $50 to keep the offer open, then I would not be able to revoke it for 7 days because it would be a separate contract, a option contract. Okay. Under the UCC, it's a lot simpler. So we can have something that's called a firm offer. Okay. Contracts rules regarding a firm offer. This is a special rule on offers applicable only to merchants. We're going to talk about merchants in a second. A firm offer by a merchant cannot be revoked if the offer, 1, expresses an intention that it will be kept open, 2, is in writing, and 3, is signed by the merchant. Okay, so we have 3 requirements for a firm offer to be made. It has to be made by a merchant for starters. It has to express that the intention will be, that it will be kept open and unrevoked. It has to be in writing, and it has to be signed by the merchant. Okay, it cannot exceed 3 months. Okay, so 3 months is the maximum that we can keep a firm offer open. That's if there's not a specific time. If we put a specific time as to how long it will be kept at that open, then that will be the time frame. So I'll keep this offer open for 7 days, then I'm required to keep it open for 7 days, but it cannot exceed 3 months. Now, I said this is something that's only available to merchants, only applicable to merchants. So a merchant is somebody, is defined as somebody who trades in the type of good on a regular basis. Okay, so let's say that I want to sell my refrigerator. Okay, I'm a lawyer, I'm a college professor. I have a refrigerator. Let's say that I want to remodel my house, my kitchen. And so I want to sell my appliances. So I put an ad out someplace and I say, I want to sell my refrigerator, and somebody agrees to buy my refrigerator. I'm not a merchant because I don't regularly deal in those types of goods. Okay, change that. I'm a appliance dealer. I have a store where I sell appliances, refrigerators, stoves, microwaves, dishwashers. Because of the fact that I am a regular dealer in refrigerators, then I would be considered to be a merchant. Alexa, stop. Alexa's gone crazy this morning. So a merchant, is somebody who deals in the goods. So if I am just me and I say I want to sell my refrigerator and I'll sell it for $100, and somebody says, oh, I need that to be kept open, and I'll say, oh yeah, it's a firm offer, I'll leave that offer open, and then I sell it. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not a merchant, so I'm not going to be held to that standard. Okay. All right. What about acceptance? Acceptance under the terms of the common law are that the acceptance has to be exactly the same as the offer. Okay, that's what we refer to as the mirror image rule. Okay, we're going to talk about that again. Article 2 is a little bit wider. Okay, acceptance is defined as the unqualified assent to the act or proposal of another as the acceptance of an offer of contract. How do we accept it? Well, any manner of acceptance is acceptable under under UCC as long as it's a reasonable acceptance. Remember, we have that issue with the mailbox rule, and how does the mailbox rule affect the acceptance? Because an acceptance is valid upon dispatch. Well, under the UCC, we still have the mailbox rule, but now it is that if you respond with your acceptance under any reasonable manner, that it would be a valid acceptance. Okay, let me turn the page here. Computer seems to be okay. All right, so let's talk about the mirror image rule. Common law requires the acceptance to be identical to the offer. Okay, because remember, under common law, the offer will become the actual contract. Okay. In the UCC, we don't have the mirror image rule. The UCC has a much softer way of doing acceptance. And in reality, we're going to have something that could be called the battle of the forms. All right, so let's talk about the battle of the forms real quick. Battle of the forms is something where in the business world, there's a lot of things that you may or may not be aware of. You don't really necessarily teach it in the business school, but there's a lot more paperwork involved in getting into contracts. Start with the idea that there are only so many people that you will allow to spend your money. Think about it. You're running a business and you have a bunch of employees. How many of those people do you want to have authority to spend money? How many of those people are going to have authority to enter into contracts on behalf of your company? Now, you could, depending on the size of the company, you could say that you're the only person in the company that has that authority. Let's say that you're a much bigger company. You've got hundreds of employees and you're doing millions of dollars in business. And you, as the president or owner of the company, you're too busy to deal with all of the day-to-day things. Okay, so you're going to authorize only a certain number of people to spend your money. Okay. Once you get to a certain size in your company, you're going to have somebody who's going to be considered to be the purchasing manager for the company. If you get big enough, then the purchasing manager is the only person that can buy things on behalf of the company. If you need 100 tons of steel, he's going to be the guy who gets it. If you need 10 first aid kits in order to make sure that you comply with OSHA, he's the guy who's going to get them. Okay, it doesn't matter how big or how small. This is the person who will be purchasing everything for your company. Very often, that's the way that it's set up because you want to make sure that only a select few people have authority to spend your money. That being the case, whenever the purchasing manager buys something, he'll create a document, a writing that'll say, I want to purchase, let's say that it's 100 tons of steel. Okay, we need him to get 100 tons of steel. He's going to contact all of our steel suppliers, find out what their current price is, find out if they have the steel in stock that they can ship it, or are they going to be able to manufacture it in time to get it to us when we want it. He's going to find the best deal that he can find in the proper time frame. So he's going to decide on Acme Steel, let's say. So he tells Acme Steel, okay, yes, I want to buy 100 tons of steel and you're selling it to me at $100 a ton. Okay, so what is this? Another $10,000 deal. He will create something called a purchase order. Okay. Now, in the old days, this would be a piece of paper, and it would be, just to give you some really ancient things, it would be on what's called NCR paper, which is carbonless. You would write on the first sheet, and because of the chemical treatment of the top and the bottoms of the sheets, just the mere pressure of the pen without the ink actually touching the second or third or fourth page, you would still end up with the writing going through all of those sheets. The first, the top, the original would be sent off to the supplier. That's their purchase order. That is our offer to buy. Okay. So our offer is going to be on this thing called a purchase order. The second copy would go to the cost accountants. The third copy would go to the accounts payable people. The fourth one would go to, I don't know, you could have as many copies as you want and have it distributed however you want. But the whole point of it is that one of those copies is going to go to the supplier, to the vendor. That's our offer to buy. Okay. Now what's going to happen, the problem that we're going to have is that the purchase order is going to have a lot of pre-printed stuff on it. Okay. It's going to have our name as the company that's making the offer. It's going to have a box where you can fill in the name and address of the vendor. It's going to have a place where you describe what it is you're buying, the quantity that you want to buy, and the price that you've agreed on. All that's easy enough. That's great. But in addition to that, there's going to be pre-printed stuff on that form that's going to have the other terms, delivery within 30 days. We will pay you the net amount of the invoice 30 days after receiving the invoice. Whatever other terms that you want to be in your offer, the way that you want the contract to go. Great. Now, if this was common law, the vendor, when they would receive that offer, if they accept and decide they're going to sell to us, they would then be required to comply with all of those terms, including the terms that are pre-printed on the form. All right. How does the vendor accept the offer? Well, they can do a couple of different things. If they actually shipped us the 100 tons of steel, then that would be acceptance by an act. But most often what's going to happen is we're going to receive an invoice from the vendor. Okay, they're going to have their name on it, Acme Steel. It's going to have an invoice number. It'll have our name as the buyers, and then it'll have sold to, and then there'll be detailed information on the invoice. Sold 100 tons of grade A, whatever, describe the steel that they're selling us, 100 tons for quantity. And then they'll have the price extended out, $100 a ton. So it's $10,000 would be the amount of the invoice. And that would be carried down to the bottom where it would say amount due $10,000. Okay. We're in agreement, right? That's what we wanted to spend. That's what they wanted to charge us. Everything's great. However, our problem now is going to be that their invoice is going to have pre-printed information on it as to whatever their terms are as far as selling us the stuff. Okay. So perhaps they have on there that they're a type of company that is really trying to accelerate their collection of their receivables. So they're offering a discount for early payments. Okay. We told them that we would pay 30 days, net 30 days. Let's say that they on their invoice say that the terms of payments are 10% or 2% discount if paid in 10 days, net 20 days. All right, so that's not in agreement with the terms that were on our offer. Does this mean that we don't have a contract? No, we are going to have a contract because we really did intend to have a contract. Okay, so now the question is going to become, if we have different things going on, what is the actual contract? Okay, this is the battle of the forms, defined in the book as a merchant exchange of invoices and purchase orders with differing boilerplate terms. All right. Under Article 2, in a transaction between merchants, the additional terms or terms sent back in an acceptance become part of the contract if the additional term or terms do not materially alter the offer and offeror does not object in a timely fashion. Okay, and here's an example that they give in the book. I don't want to use their example. I want to go back in the book page 2 here because there's a rule here that I want to talk about. All right. All right. What happens if we don't have an agreement between the offer and the acceptance? There has to be some rules, and yes, Article 2 is going to give us additional rules here, okay? If we have additional terms in acceptance, okay, additional terms. So we have the purchase order that goes out and it has all of its boilerplate language in its terms. And then we have an acceptance that comes on the invoice, but the invoice has additional terms, okay? Under Article 2, unless an offer expressly specifies that an offer to buy or sell goods must be accepted exactly as made, the offeree may make an offer at the same time proposed and at the same time propose an additional term or terms. Under common law, this is a counteroffer which voids the offer. Under Article 2 of the UCC, it doesn't void. The additional term or terms in the acceptance does not result in a rejection as under common law. A contract is formed with the terms of the original offer. The additional terms are proposals for addition to the contract and may or may not be accepted by the other party. Okay, so if I put in there net payments, we will make our payment of the net or the amount of the invoice in 30 days. And they respond back with, we'll give you a 2% discount if you pay in 10 days, but it'll be net 30. So that's an additional term. So we can either reject the additional term or we can accept the additional term. The contract is formed. These, by the way, this is for non-merchants. Okay, so non-merchants, an additional term does not become part of the contract. Okay, I'm selling my refrigerator to somebody who is willing to buy it. I'm not a merchant. We agree that I'll offer to sell it to you for $100. You agree that you want to buy it for $100, but you want me to deliver the refrigerator to you. Well, no, I don't want to deliver the refrigerator to you. It's not worth my time and effort at a sale price of $100. So we would not have the additional term added to the contract. What about if we're merchants? Okay, additional terms in acceptance if we are merchants. Under Article 2, the use of additional terms in acceptances by merchants is different. The requirement of merchants, the different treatment of merchants is in acceptance is a result of a commercial barrier. Let me see, get to the right part here. Okay, article in a transaction between merchants, the additional term or terms sent back in an acceptance become part of the contract if the additional term or terms does not materially alter the offer and the offeror does not object in a timely fashion. Okay, so non-merchants, additional term, no, the additional terms do not become part of the contract unless the offeror agrees to those terms. So they don't automatically become part of the contract. In a transaction between merchants, the additional terms become part of the contract unless the offeror says, no, I'm not doing that. Okay, so it would have to be something different than them offering me a benefit of a discount if I pay quicker. Let's say that the additional terms would be payment by cashier's check only, because they don't want to accept my my company check, because maybe I have a reputation for bouncing checks. So they'll say, yes, we'll sell you the steel, 100 tons of steel at $100 a ton, $10,000 total price, payable net 30. So far, everything's agreeing with the offer that's on the purchase order. However, payment required to be by cashier's check, not normal personal or business check. Okay, so did that materially alter the contract? Well, same exact type of steel. We're not changing the type of steel. It's the exact same specifications and measurements. It's the exact same quantity. It's the exact same price. It's the same payment terms, 30 days. It's just that they want the money to be in certified funds. I don't think that materially altered the contract. And because it didn't materially alter basically what the offer was, then that would become part of the contract unless the buyer says, no, I'm not going to pay you with a cashier's check. Then we don't have a contract. Okay, so if it materially offered, let's say that I ordered 100 tons of steel, and the seller responds back with an invoice that invoices me for 100 tons of steel, but they require me to pay $4,000 in shipping charges. Well, that normally it would be included in the price type thing. Does that materially change the what we believe the deal is? Yeah, that would materially change the deal. So that would not automatically be added. Okay. If the proposed additional term is material, a contract is formed, but the material addition does not become part of the contract. Here's a spot where the revision, the second version of the UCC is differs from the original. We're in Article 2, Section 207 of the UCC. Because there's so many confusion circumstances with additional terms, the effect of the new 2207 was to leave the issues of what or what is not included in the contract to the courts. However, the revision has not been as needed as originally believed, because so many businesses and individuals are using the internet to contract and working out their terms through ongoing and immediate exchange of questions. Okay, so in the original UCC, we would have the courts dealing with it. The revised is that it would just be added if it's not material. All right, what about if there are changes? Should be the next thing here. Give me a second. All right, conflicting terms. So we have not an additional term in the acceptance. We have conflicting terms in the acceptance. Okay. For example, a buyer's purchase order may require the seller to offer full warranty protection, whereas the seller's invoice may include a disclaimer of all warranties. The buyer's purchase order may include a clause that provides payment in 30 days, same as cash, whereas the invoice may include a term that says 10 days, same as cash. It's clear they want to get into a contract, but the terms are not the same. Article 2 wants to create a contract. So how do we get to here? All right. If the conflicting terms are in the basic requirements, such as price, the courts may conclude that they have not had a meeting of the minds. When the terms make it clear they want to make a contract, but we have different terms. UCC will recognize that the contract has been formed. The terms that are conflicting cancel each other out and are ignored. The contract then consists of the terms of the offer and acceptance that agree. Example in the book: if one party's contract form provided for full warranty protection and the other party's form provided for no warranty protection, the terms cancel each other out. The party's contract includes only the warranties that are allowed under Article 2. We're going to talk about those in a later chapter. All right. On the outline, merchant versus non-merchant, firm versus firm offer, mirror image rule, battle of the forms, additional terms for non-merchant, additional terms for merchant, conflicting terms. All right, defenses to formation of contracts is the next thing on the outline. All right, defenses. So can we have a defense where we would say no contract is going to be formed here? Fraud. Okay, if we can prove that there was fraud involved in the transaction, can we use fraud to get out of the contract? Sure. What was the definition of fraud? Fraud was a material misstatement, a misstatement of a material fact that was relied upon by one party to his detriment. Okay, so if you lie about something, a major material fact, then fraud will be involved, and that is a defense to the formation of a contract, even if we're under the UCC. We talked about unconscionability in when we're talking about common law of contracts, remember? And I said, well, unconscionability is a bit of a problem because we end up going into equity. And because of equity, we don't know necessarily what our result is going to be. So you can get out of the contract if it's unconscionable. We remember I went through the example of the rental, the furniture rental company charging ridiculous amounts of money to somebody that was less sophisticated, blah, blah, blah. But you're at the mercy of the court. The UCC actually does codify unconscionability. UCC includes an additional contract defense for parties to sale contracts called unconscionability, permits the court to refuse to enforce a sales contract that it finds to be unconscionable, generally defined as grossly unfair. A court can find a clause or portion of a contract unconscionable and refuse to just enforce that portion of the contract. So unconscionability, although under common law is purely an equity thing, it's part of the law when you talk about the UCC. So if we have a sales contract, contract for the sale of goods, then UCC is part of the law, not part of equity. So it's a different way of approaching it. Illegality, if we have an illegal sale or some sort of the contract itself is illegal, that is not going to be enforceable. That is a defense to the formation of a contract. What else do I have? That's about the only thing that I have that I thought was super important. All right, let's talk about gap fillers. So here's our problem. I had told you that the UCC is going to be much more forgiving about the formation of a contract because the whole purpose of the UCC is to try and create contracts where otherwise a contract wouldn't be formed under common law. Okay, so there's going to be times where you would say, well, wait a minute, the offer is nowhere near enough, with enough detail in order for us to tell what the contract is all about. Okay, and I said that under the UCC, all we needed was a description of the product and a quantity. Didn't even need a price. Okay, so let's talk about that. How can we have a contract and not discuss the price? Okay, the price may be an open term whereby the parties merely indicate how the price will be determined at a later date. Okay, so in the business world, we will occasionally say that we're uncomfortable setting a price, especially if the time for performance is going to be some point in the future. And especially if we have a type of goods where the price or the market price of the product changes, it fluctuates wildly. Okay. When I was sitting in your seats back when I was in school, the example that they gave was linseed oil. You guys don't have a clue what linseed oil is, but linseed oil is a type of oil that is used to treat wood to make it last longer. Nobody uses linseed oil anymore, so we have to come up with something different. Let's say that it's gold, or something that fluctuates on a very regular basis. So we don't know that if we set a price in a contract now that is going to be performed 6 months from now, we have no idea what's going to happen to the price of that good. I may end up setting myself up to end up losing a tremendous amount of money because of the fact that I promised a price today to deliver something 6 months from now, and I should have known that the price of that particular commodity could change dramatically. Okay, so one of the things we can do is we can set a market price. So I could say, well, we'll do the sale and it's to be performed at X point in the future, but the price will be the market price at that point in time. Here's an example. The one company that I worked for that was a manufacturer, they manufactured industrial shelving. I told you about them. One of the things that we did is we had a lot of scrap. So we would take the steel, we had coils of steel that were probably around 5 feet wide, 4 feet wide that we would buy, run them through our machines, would shear them off to the appropriate widths of the pieces that we needed, go through the bending tools that would bend it into what it was supposed to be, would punch out the holes where the different things were going to connect together. That gave us a lot of scrap steel. Okay, so we didn't just throw the scrap steel in the landfill. We sold the scrap steel to a scrap company. Okay, so they would give us a dumpster, and once a week they would come and they would take our dumpster and they would pay us for the steel, the scrap steel that was in there. The contract that we had with them was for a year, and then we would renew it every year. But nobody knew what the price of scrap steel was going to be at any particular time, because that's something that changed on a daily basis. You didn't move like 4,000% in one direction per day, but it did change over the period of time. So we didn't have a price in the contract. What we said was that they would come and they would collect the steel scrap on a weekly basis from our facility, and then they would weigh it to see how much scrap steel we had. That was the quantity. We had no idea what the quantity was going to be. We'll get to quantity in a minute. But we also had no idea what the price of scrap steel was going to be at that time. So what we had in the contract was that it would be the market price. Now, how do you set the market price? You have to find some sort of third party, some sort of independent source where you're going to get your market price, if you're going to use that in order to establish the price in your contract. So believe it or not, there was an industry in the scrap metal. There was an association of scrap metal dealers, and they published a newsletter on a weekly basis. And in their newsletter, this is a national association, in their newsletter, they would quote the market price of scrap steel for that particular week. Okay. Now, it was also broken down by region of the country, because what region of the country you're in is going to determine what the price is in that location. So the price in the mid-Atlantic states, which is where Pennsylvania is, were different than from the Northeast, the New England states, or the Great Lakes states like Michigan and whatnot, or the West Coast area. So every area had its own market price that would be reported in this association newsletter. So we agreed that we would sell our scrap steel at whatever the market price was in the region that we were. So we were in the Mid-Atlantic region, which was reported in this newsletter from this association. They were a third party that was not able to control. So it wasn't that we were going to end up being cheated because they were going to set a price that was not going to be a legitimate price. So it was a nice third party authority that we could rely on to give us market price. So that's the price that was in our contract for the scrap steel that we had. Okay, so we didn't even have to have price. What about the quantity? Okay, do we have to have quantity? This is another one of those gap fillers that's in the UCC. UCC will tell you that you don't need to have a specific amount. You just need to be able to identify what the amount is. Okay, so under the UCC, fine. If I'm buying 100 tons of steel, I'll put down 100 tons of steel. But let's say that instead of me wanting to negotiate the find a supplier for my steel every time that I'm going to, let's say that I buy the steel every 6 weeks because that's my production cycle. So every 6 weeks, I have to have my purchasing manager go out there and price everybody and make sure that they have the manufacturing ability to supply the steel when I want it, blah, 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 blah. What if I end up in negotiations with a steel supplier and they say, listen, we're going to give you a better price. We'll give you a 10% discount over the price. And maybe they're going to set some sort of a standard according to market price of steel, according to the Steel Producers Association, who could do that. But how much steel am I buying? Well, Cobaltech Widgets, let's say that last year we produced, I don't know, 1 million widgets. And in order to produce 1 million widgets, it took 500 tons of steel. So am I going to get into a contract with this steel producer for 500 tons of steel so that what they want to do is they want to supply my steel for the next year? They don't want me to buy it from anywhere else. They're willing to give me a bit of a discount on the price as long as I guarantee that I buy all of my steel from them. All right, let's say that I'm okay with that. 10% reduction in the raw material that is the biggest part of my product. Well, that would be a good deal. If I got a 10% discount, I'd be able to get a little bit more profit, maybe reduce my price, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, I want the 10% discount. So do I get into a contract with them for 500 tons of steel? No, I don't. What I do is I get into what's called a requirements contract. So what we agree to is that I will buy all of my steel from them for the next year. Whatever the amount of steel that I need, I will buy from them. And they'll give me this price that we've negotiated. And I'm getting a preferred price for agreeing that I'm only buying my steel from them. Whatever I require, I will buy from them. I'm not allowed to go to anybody else. Okay, if I agree with Acme that they're going to produce my steel and they're going to provide me everything I require, I'm not allowed during the year to say, oh, wait a minute, U.S. Steel's got a special price on steel right now. Let's get a couple hundred tons from U.S. Steel. Not allowed to do that. We have to use Acme. That's what the requirements contract is. Okay, so I don't know what that quantity is going to be. I really don't. But I know that it's going to be all of my steel. Now, let's look at what that really means. If and of course, they're going to want some sort of a guesstimate as to how much steel I'm going to need for the year. And I'm going to say, okay, it's going to take maybe, last year we used 500 tons of steel. So that's what we anticipate it'll be something close to that. And they say, okay, good. And they do all of their calculations based on us needing around 500 tons of steel. All right. What happens if I have a good year? And that's what everybody's hoping to have happen, is that our sales are going to increase. And, generally, what are you looking for? Maybe a 10, 15% increase in your sales from year to year type thing. And so maybe let's say I have 10% sales growth next year, quantities, okay? So instead of needing 500 tons of steel, I'm going to need 550 tons of steel. is Acme required to give me that additional steel at the price that we quoted in the original contract? Change the facts. There's a recession and my sales actually go down by 10%. So instead of needing 500 tons of steel, I'm only going to need 450 tons of steel. Certainly, Acme is going to give me that 450 tons, but are they going to sue me because I didn't buy that extra 50 tons? See, that's what a requirements contract does for you, especially if you're if it's a requirements contract, you don't have to give them an exact amount. Okay. If I need more, they're required to give me the more that I need under the original terms of the contract. If I need or if I require less, then they're going to provide me what I require, and they can't sue me if I end up buying less than we anticipated at the beginning. As long as I bought everything from them, I would not be in violation of the contract. I would not be in breach of contract. Okay, so this is a good thing. What if my sales double next year? So instead of needing 500 tons of steel, I need, what is that, 1,000 tons of steel. Well, that may not be something that Acme is going to be required to provide to me, okay? Because we're going to allow for there to be a certain amount of change, growth, or a little bit of bad luck, that type of thing. All right, that's fine. But if it ends up being something that's not reasonably expected, then we'll probably have to renegotiate for something above what we would have anticipated. Open quantity and contracts such as these introduce an element of uncertainty. Such sales contracts are valid, but subject to two limitations. One, the parties must act in good faith, and two, the quantity offered or demanded must not be unreasonably disproportionate to prior output or requirements or to stated estimates. With these restrictions, retain all propane, the homeowner retain all propane she needs for heating, but cannot use a particular benefit price under to purchase additional propane to sell to others. Okay, so we talked about a requirements contract. What about a output contract? Okay, so let's say that I am a new business making widgets. Okay, so I'm just entering the widget business, and I, because of some certain technological advances that I have, I'm going to be able to produce my widgets a little bit cheaper than the established widget companies that are out there. They'll be of the same quality, but I'm not a big enough company that I'm going to be able to completely dominate the world at this point. And there's one company out there that is a very big widget consumer. Okay, they buy a lot of widgets in the widget market every year. And they take a look at my widgets and they are very pleased with my widgets. And they say, listen, we want to buy a whole bunch of widgets from you. And I go, sure, how many you want? They go, how many can you produce? I say, well, looking at the way that we're staffing and looking at the machinery that we have right now, and if we run at full capacity, we will be able to produce 300,000 widgets this year. Let's say that this company normally buys 2 million widgets on the market. So my 200,000 widgets is only a portion of what they're going to need. So they could say, listen, we will buy everything you can produce this year, because we can certainly use, 200,000 widgets. That's not going to be more than we need. It's a lot less than we need. So we'll buy everything that you make. We get into a contract for that. And, we agree to the price and whatnot. Of course, these things aren't going to be delivered all at once. They're going to be delivered as they're put together over the years. Same thing with the requirements contract. That steel wasn't delivered at the beginning of the year. We asked for it throughout the year as we needed it. But now with the outputs contract, what's the quantity? Well, we estimated that it was going to be somewhere around 200,000. So let's say that I get a little bit more efficient and I'm able to produce 220,000 widgets instead of 200,000. Are they going to be required to buy 220,000 widgets? Sure, it's an output contract, and that's a reasonable amount compared to what our estimate was. Let's say that I have some problems with my my machinery and my processes, and instead of being able to produce 200,000 widgets, I only produce 190,000 widgets. They're still going to be required to buy all of them, but are they going to sue me for the other 10? No, because I didn't sell them to someone else. It's not that they didn't get the widgets because I breached the contract and sold them elsewhere. I gave them everything I had, and it's pretty close to what it was supposed to be. So we acted in good faith. The quantities delivered were very close to what we expected. There's your quantity. All right. How long does a contract go? When a contract is a continuing contract, no time is set for the life of the contract. Guess what? The reasonable man's going to come up here. The contract will run for a reasonable time. Okay. Take a look at the outline here again. Gap fillers. Validity termination of indefinite term of contract. We're good there. Parallel evidence rule is the next thing I have here. Course of dealings and use of trade. Okay. Modifications. An agreement to modify a contract is binding, even though it is not supported by consideration. Okay. Under common law, if we wanted to modify a contract, there would have to be new consideration in order to modify. In the UCC, we don't have to have additional consideration in order to modify a contract. The parallel evidence rule. We talked about parallel evidence in common law contracts. Remember that in common law, the judges don't want, if we've got a writing, we've got a contract in front of them, they don't want to hear testimony that says that there's some other agreement other than what's on the paper. They really want to be able to just look at the paper and say that's what the contract is. Well, remember there are exceptions to that: fraud, duress, mistake, probably mistaken transcription. Those things would allow parallel evidence. All right, parallel evidence rule under the UCC. If the court decides that the contract is to represent the entire agreement, parallel evidence is not admissible. If the court decides that the writing was not intended to represent the entire contract, the writing can be supplemented by other evidence, as long as those terms are not inconsistent with the written terms. It can also be admitted to interpret contract terms to show the parties meant by their words. Does not prohibit the proof of fraud, misrepresentation, or other defenses in the formation. Okay. How do we interpret contracts? Remember when we had when we were talking about common law, we had rules of interpretation. Okay. We had handwritten changes are more important than typewritten changes, which are more important than pre-printed terms. You remember that. Also, numbers that are written out in words are more important than numbers that are written with Arabic numerals. Okay, so interpreting the course of interpreting a contract, one of the things that we can have that will be useful to the courts is what is the course of dealings between these parties. Okay, if we've done business in the past and we have always assumed that our contract meant a certain thing, if all of a sudden we decided to change what we believe the contract says, and we end up in court because of this disagreement, the court will tend to look at what we've done in the past. Example, if the parties had 10 previous agreements and payment was always made on the 30th day following delivery, the conduct could be used to interpret the meaning of the clause payment due in 30 days. When the start of the 30 days is not specifically agreed to in the contract. So whatever we did in those prior 10 agreements is what the courts would say, well, that's what you meant. Okay. What about usage of the trade? That means that we're in a situation where the contract is in a particular industry, and that industry has certain types of interpretations. Okay. Example in the book: suppose that a contract provides for the sale of mohair. There are two types of mohair: adult and kid. Because adult mohair is cheaper and easier to find, industry custom provides that unless the parties specifically place the term kid with the term mohair in the contract is for the sale of adult mohair. So you're not going to get kid mohair just by saying mohair, because that is not the usage in the industry. Right. Course of dealing, usage of trade, form of sales contract, writing and statute of fraud, confirmation memorandum, and exceptions to the writing requirement. Okay, so let's look at the form of it. The statute of frauds, as we know, is where the law requires that there be a writing, that an oral contract is not going to be enforceable. All right, so we know that under common law, it's going to be for sale of an interest in land, conveyance of an interest in land. If a contract will need more than 1 year to be completed, for somebody to take on and be responsible for the debts of another, for an executor to take on the debts of the decedent, and so on. Okay, the UCC is out here, and under the UCC, whenever the sale price of goods is $500 or more, the contract must be evidenced by a record to be enforceable. That's the original UCC. Revised UCC, this amount has been increased to $5,000. Okay, so if your state uses the original version of the UCC, you have to have a writing if it's over $500. If your state is using the revised Article 2 UCC, then it's anything $5,000 and more requires a writing. Now I say writing, but I mean record. Remember that electronic forms are allowed as long as it is something that is complete and it is stored electronically someplace where it can be reproduced at any time. Okay, that's the statute of frauds under the UCC. It has a dollar limit. Okay, and for our purposes, we'll use the $5,000 level. I think that makes a little more sense. $500 in today's world is really a very small amount. So we'll use the revised UCC in our stuff. Okay. Now, let's go beyond that. Okay. Satisfy the UCC statute of fraud, a record must indicate there's been a completed transaction covering certain goods. The record must indicate a sale or contract for sale has been made, state the quantity of goods involved. All other terms can be supplied by the code itself. The record must be signed or authenticated by the person who is being held to the contract or by an authorized agent of that person. So once again, we did talk about this in the common law of contracts, where you have only one party that signs the writing. We can enforce the contract against that person. If the other party did not sign, then we cannot enforce the contract against them because we don't have the proof that they did it. Once again, we live in an electronic world. So electronic signature, by whatever means you have agreed that the signature is, whether you physically write your name on input into the computer screen, or whether you just type in your name, or you type in your initials, or you put in your credit card or something, those all would be considered to be appropriate signatures on a document. All right, so there's an exception to the writing requirement, specifically the signature requirement. Okay, the UCC statute of frauds does provide an important exception to the signature requirement for merchants that enables merchants to expedite their transactions. This exception allows merchants to create a confirmation memorandum of their oral agreement as evidence of the agreement. This is in merchants only, okay? A merchant's confirmation memorandum is a letter or a memo or an electronic document signed or authenticated by one of the two merchants to the oral agreement. This can be used by either party to enforce the contract. Okay, now, if you remember under common law, and I used the example that we had gone to lunch and we had agreed that I was going to sell you 1,000 widgets and you were going to buy this 1,000 widgets. And then you went back to your office and you wrote a confirmation memorandum. Hey, just wanted to remind you, thanks for the lunch. You're to ship me 1,000 widgets in 30 days and I will pay you 30 days later at a price of $10 per widget. Okay. And I had said that that would only be enforceable against the person who actually signed that memorandum. Well, because that would be a contract that would be covered by the UCC, the common law would say only the one party, but under the UCC, it would be enforceable against both parties. A confirming memo in various forms of communication sent by one merchant to another results in a binding and enforceable contract that satisfies the statute of fraud. Such a confirmation binds the non-signing or non-authenticating merchant just as if he had signed the letter or contract. A merchant can object when he receives the confirmation memo, but he must do so immediately because the confirming memo takes effect in 10 days if there's no objection. The confirmation procedure makes it necessary for a merchant to watch their communication in all forms of correspondence and to act within the 10 days of receiving a confirmation. Okay, so this is, once again, UCC is a little bit different. It really is trying to create these contracts. Okay, it's not trying to void contracts, which is what it seems a common law is doing. The UCC is much more lax when it comes to some of these things. Remember, we had said under the common law of contracts that silence was not acceptance, would never be acceptance. Here it can be. Okay, so we have that lunch. We agreed that I'm going to sell you 1,000 widgets and you're going to pay $10 a piece. I'll manufacture it and get them to you within 30 days, and you'll pay me 30 days after receipt of the widgets. You write that confirmation memo to me and you email it to me. I read the email. Okay. I have 10 days, even if I don't read it. Okay. I have 10 days from when you sent me the confirmation or confirming memo. I have 10 days to object. What if I had said that I could only do that if you bought 2,000 widgets, that I was not going to do that deal for only 1,000? And you send me that memo that says, okay, thanks for selling me 1,000 widgets, $10 a piece, blah, blah, blah. I get that memo from you. And I know, no, I'm not going to do that if you're only buying 1,000 widgets. I'm only doing that price if you do 2,000 widgets, but I do nothing about it. Well, in 10 days, your memorandum becomes the agreement because I didn't object to it. I had an obligation to object to your memo. So what I should have done is I should have sent you back an email that said, no, wait a minute, you misunderstood. That price of $10 per widget is only if you buy a quantity of 2,000 or more. 1,000 widgets, you'd have to pay me $12 a piece. I send that back to you. We don't have an agreement. Okay, there is no contract. Okay, so this is a little bit different. All right, bill of sale is the next thing that I have, and then the international rules for a sale of goods. All right, give me a second here. Oh, exceptions to the requirements of specially manufactured goods. If I do if I'm required to make some special thing that nobody else in the world would buy, then the statute of frauds doesn't apply. Something else I just saw that I think I want to show you. 1 second. Admission. An oral contract may be enforced against a party if that party admits in pleadings, testimony, or otherwise in court that the contract was made. The contract is not enforceable beyond the quantity of goods admitted. So we agree I'm going to give you 1,000 widgets at $10 a piece. I never give you the widgets and you're harmed. You sue me, but it was never in writing. Okay. So you're cocky, or no, I'm cocky. You sue me for the 1,000, for the damages because I never gave you the 1,000 widgets, and I'm on the witness chair at the trial, and your lawyer says, "Isn't it true that you agreed to sell him 1,000 widgets?" And on the witness stand, I say, "Yeah, but that was only an oral agreement. It was never reduced to writing, so that's not valid, right?" Well, I just agreed that I just proved to the court that I knew that I was supposed to give you 1,000 widgets. I just admitted that a contract existed. The fact that it's not in writing is no longer relevant because I screwed myself up and told the court that, yeah, it did exist. I understood that. All right, bill of sale. A bill of sale is a writing signed by the seller reciting that the personal property therein described has been sold to the buyer. Okay, so this is, once again, this is now a document of title, a bill of sale. It's not a bill, it's not a contract, but what it is it's basically, if you will, a receipt that recites that the items have been sold. I guess realistically, that would be the receipt that you get when you go to a retail store like a Walmart or something. I buy a big screen TV at Walmart, I get a receipt, right? That's a bill of sale. It's not a contract. But what it is it's a proof that the sale happened. So now it becomes a document of title. All right, international sales. The uniform law for international sales, it's something called the Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods. We refer to this as the CISG. Applies to contracts between parties in the United States and parties in other nations that have ratified the convention. What does the CISG look like in international trade? Well, it looks an awful lot like Article 2 of the Uniform Commercial Code. Okay, yes, the United States is the 800-pound gorilla. We get to do pretty much whatever we want. We have a lot of influence in the international community when it comes to trade. So when the countries were getting together to try and find some standardization for how to interpret and enforce contracts internationally, they ended up just mostly adopting Article 2 of the Uniform Commercial Code. Not exact, but it is relatively close. Okay. Leases I have on the now. So leases. A lease is an agreement between the owner of property and the tenant by which the former agrees to give possession of the property in exchange for the payment of rent. Okay, so leases for personal property. Can we have leases for personal property? Yes, we do. We see that commonly. That's a common transaction with automobiles. Okay, so you can go to a car dealer and you can not buy the car, you can end up leasing the car. Realistically, leasing is just another way of financing something. Okay, a consumer lease is made by a merchant lessor regularly engaged in the business of leasing or selling the types of goods. Consumer lease is made to a natural person, not a corporation, who takes possession of goods primarily for personal, family, or household use. Okay, so a consumer lease is made by a merchant to an individual for personal use. A commercial lease is something that is not a consumer lease. So it's going to be a merchant to a merchant or a merchant to an individual, but not for personal family use, but for business use. A finance lease is a three-party transaction involving a lessor, a lessee, and a supplier. Instead of going directly to the supplier for goods, the consumer goes to the financer, and the financer arranges for the delivery of the goods, and they take the payments. Okay. Just looking through what it says in the rest of the chapter here, there's a section on warranties and defaults of leases. I'm not going to waste my time with that. Looking at the outline for this chapter, We also have bill of sale listed a second time there. I think that's just a mistake because we've already talked about bills of sale. And that is the end of the chapter. I think we'll call it a day there. I'm not going to bother taking attendance. It's just too wild to do that right now. I did record this, so if there's anybody that didn't have a chance to catch this, they'll be able to watch it. I'll post it later in the day on Moodle. Or if you were, maybe I was so boring that you fell asleep and you have to try and watch it again, it'll be out there for you. Does anybody have any questions about Article 2, it's sale of goods, UCC sale of goods? If not, then we will get back to here. Let's see, on Tuesday of next week, we will have 23. We'll start chapter 23, which is title and risk of loss. And that is something that's also important when we talk about supply chain, really. So that's another part of the supply chain. No questions? Okay, if not, we'll see you on Tuesday. If you have me for a class later in the day, business communications, I'm not sure what's going on with that yet. It may be on Zoom. It may be face-to-face. It all depends on whether the weather is going to be proper for me to get the heck out of here. But watch your emails to see what the answer to that question is. So I'll make that determination in the next couple of hours, because if I'm going to be there at 1 o'clock, I have to leave. But that means I need to get out of where I am. Okay, no questions. We'll call it a day, and we'll see you later, or we'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks a lot.